to today's City Council meeting. We're glad you're joining us, and we have here with us to help us start the meeting off with an invocation, Pastor David Ritchie from Redeemer Church. Pastor?
It's a pleasure to be with you all. Let me pray for us. Almighty and everlasting God, Lord, despite all the chaos, the confusion, the struggle of this world, we know that you are a holy God and that from age to age, angels declare your glory and your might. We humble ourselves under your mighty hand today, and we ask for mercy and grace over our great city. I pray for our mayor, our city councilors, our city manager, all of our leaders, that they would be granted fortitude, endurance, confidence, compassion, and wisdom that comes from above. I pray that under their leadership, the people of our city, all people of our city, would enjoy peace and blessing. Lord, I continue to pray for those that are sick, that you would heal them. I pray for the families of those that we have lost, that you would comfort them. I pray for our medical professionals and all of our health officials, that you would grant them skill and strength. We pray for the flourishing of our economy and for the gift of businesses and vocations. And especially today, as Amarillo Independent School District has come back into session, we pray for our schools, for our students, for our teachers, for our administrators, for our parents, that for some of them are starting homeschool learning for the very first time. I pray that this would be a season of blessing, a season of peace, that you would protect us and allow us to prosper. In your mercy, we ask for an end of the season of COVID. And until then, we pray that you would grant us the grace to love one another well, to unite instead of dividing, to be able to seek the common good for our city and for one another, to refrain from anger and to forsake wrath in a culture that is so prone to outrage, to not fear, but to walk in wisdom and compassion. Help us to model the joy of Christ, your Son, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. In his mighty name that we pray these things. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. I agree with all of those, and we appreciate you being here to bless us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mayor. God bless you.
Thank you. Okay, Council, today we're going to do just a little bit of rearranging. We're going to start with item 1F on the agenda, discussing the proposed Civic Center project and bond election. Mr. City Manager?
Right. We have on the call with us HVS, Tom Hazinski with HVS. They're the foremost company for doing the financial and analysis of business plans and how things will perform once they're built. They've done the work for us with regard to analyzing the Civic Center and Arena project that is on the bond for November of this year. So they're here. They can answer any questions that council has on the topic, if there are any questions. It's really just in case. Mayor, I'd hand it to you because this is something that was requested by council. So I'm here. Obviously, we have Kevin Starbuck, our project manager. We also have, deputy city manager and project manager. We also have a number of other staff members that have been key and critical to the project, getting it to this point. So we're all here to answer any questions council might have, along with Tom with HVS.
Great. First, I welcome Tom. Tom, thank you for making time to be with us today. And sorry you're not here in person, but it is pretty convenient to just have you hop on our call, isn't it?
It sure is. It's a lot shorter flight.
It's a lot shorter flight. That's right.
Great.
But the food's not as good, maybe.
Yeah.
So, well, I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Smith and just start with you, Howard, if you've got any questions or anything you wanted to cover on this topic. It's on here by your request. Uh-oh, wait, you're mute, Howard. Sorry. There you go.
Is that better?
Yes, sir, it is.
I appreciate you putting this on the agenda. It wasn't exactly what I asked for. I asked for the citizen to come to executive session. And I understand we can't have that. And so that's fine. And I understand he may be meeting with council members individually. He's invited people to meet individually. So I don't have any questions.
Okay, well, Mr. City Manager, you did visit with that citizen and make him aware that the topic he wanted to or visit with you about didn't qualify for executive session. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am. As based on the information I had, that wasn't something I could do, but we had a good conversation.
And we invited him to come today and visit with all five of us. And he didn't want to do that, or at least passed on it at this time. Is that right?
It wasn't something they wanted to do at this time.
Okay, great. Well, we're open to listening, and we want to make that available. But obviously, we have to operate under the Open Meetings Act, and we want to comply with that. So we appreciate the advice of our counsel in keeping us square inside the requirements of that law. Does the council have any questions for Tom about, one of the things about having HVS on our team while we've been working on this and studying it, as we've been doing for years now, since 2011, is just their expertise. I know this council really values making decisions based on data, and we've relied heavily on Tom's team as they've prepared economic data for us, both on what size the arena should be and that type of thing. But what we've tried to do is be transparent as possible for voters to understand what the project might look like, knowing that when it comes down to the final design, we might come under the number that that we're currently working with. We might actually have a tenant in the new arena that might require different things. And all of those are conversations that could be happening in the future. But as this is getting closer to election time, I just wonder if the four of you are getting questions from citizens about economic data or size of the arena or anything else that you might want to ask Tom. So I'm so glad that it worked for Tom to be with us today. And I'll just open it up to council if there are any other questions from y'all that you want to bounce off of him. Can't hear you, Eddie.
My microphone's not working.
Nope, it's working. We hear you
Oh,
now.
it is?
Yes,
it
it
is.
is. Don't touch anything. It's working.
Okay. Okay, so I do have a couple of questions. So my questions will be, let's talk about the arena just a little bit. And so I would, and you even brought up the whole thing about a tenant possibly, or the possibility of working toward that. So my question is going to be around the arena. So how does that work if we do start pursuing a tenant, an anchor tenant, so to speak, for the arena? What does that do as far as planning going forward? What did you all figure into this, Tom, specifically, whenever you were developing the idea behind the arena and the size of the arena? I've heard from a couple of different citizens about it, so I kind of want to understand where you came from in making, where your group, not just you, what your group came from in making a plan for the arena and what you all looked at. Did you all consider an anchor tenant? All of those things, because I do think that they probably do play effect on the success of the arena going forward.
Hey, first of all, our research actually started years ago, and we made our best efforts to understand what the potential market is for the arena. And we're focused on a variety of different types of events that would occupy them. Some are sports. We looked at potential tennis sports. We also looked at concerts and entertainment, as well as civic events. And our building program recommendation that recommended 7,500 seats and other amenities was geared toward meeting a wide variety of those needs. We do have in our forecast 38 tennis sports events, primarily hockey, occurring in the venue. And we another effort we made in our projections was to take the most conservative route. And so while we anticipated that additional tenancy might be possible, it was kind of speculative and not a guaranteed thing. So we took the more conservative approach in our projections to assume that it did not occur. But the venue itself and the program we recommended and the design that has been developed is one that would readily accommodate a tenant. And that tenant, in fact, might bring additional capital to bear, depending on the relationship to that tenant. But we, at the point in our study, there wasn't a particular additional tenant committed to the venue, so we did not assume that there was that kind of anchor tenant. But it's ready, it's available if that were to happen somewhere down the road.
Okay, so you said 7,500 seats, and I thought that I read somewhere, matter of fact, I've got it sitting in front of me, that the capacity was going to be 8,600.
Yeah, well, 7,500 is, there's a number of different configurations. So this would be, I can't remember whether it was basketball or hockey where the 7,500 was for, but if you were to do a concert and put people on the floor, right, you could increase the capacity to 8,600. So there's not just a single capacity. It depends on the type of event, the type of stage setup you might have, or the type of floor area that you need for that particular sport. And so there's a variation in the
from what I see here, it said basketball's 9,700, hockey, arena football, indoor soccer was 8,600.
Mm-hmm. What document are you looking at with that?
I'm looking at the Conversation Civic Center document.
Okay. All right. Sherman,
so have things changed since then?
Sherman, could you? I didn't put together the conversation document, so maybe Sherman could help with an explanation of what numbers you use there. Okay.
Dr. Sauer, the 8,600 is the number of fixed seats, including collapsible seating on the arena floor, that was necessary to get to the magic number of 9,000 end-stage concert capacity. And the total capacity for the venue for in the round is 10,100.
Right.
But although HBS recommended 7,500 fixed seats, as Populous worked on the preliminary program space, that increased to 8,600 in order to get to that 9,000 end-stage capacity.
Okay. So in other words, really what Tom was saying was correct. They made a recommendation of 7,500.
That's right. Correct. But that was for a hockey configuration, right. So we allowed that it would be larger if the floor were used for seating and an end stage capacity. And that, as happens a lot during the design process, our building program recommendations get changed depending on site considerations and other considerations that enter during the design process.
Okay. So you all felt like that an anchor tenant was not necessarily likely to happen.
We actually didn't opine on the likelihood of it happening. It was just that anchor tenant wasn't knocking on the door at the time we did our study, so we did not include that.
Okay.
Tom, going forward, though, the project is in a position where, as it continues to be designed, all of that is still on the table to be talked about and designed for, correct?
Oh, certainly. It's not as far as I understand, the design is not at a stage where it could not be altered. Of course, you have certain budget constraints that you would want to work within. But if there were a specific tenant that came with more specific needs And that might relate not so much to overall capacity, but to amenities that are included in the facility, like number of points of sale or something like that. Then those could be changed during the design process.
Mayor, and like Tom says, the best example of that is Hodgetown, where we had an anchor tenant in the Elmores. They were a key part of the design process for that facility. In the event that we did have a similar situation with the arena, we would definitely take into account their input might happen in there, or for any events that might happen in there, whether it's hockey, rodeo, basketball, different kinds of soccer. There's a lot of different sports that could happen in a facility and do happen in facilities like that, arena football. And then also to take into account, it will be a partner that has familiarity with concerts and other things like that, because that's another key component of design that we've been angling towards.
Okay, so now then, I guess my final question is this. Okay, so things can change, and we have time for those things to change. And what is our time frame, do you feel like, in this building process before we have to have that nailed down? Because I know it's not going to be year one. We've got many things that are going to be ramped up actually before the arena would actually even begin to be built. So how much time, if we were to begin to court a anchor tenant, how much time do we have? Or is that a question that can be asked?
Well, I think this is more of a probably me and Kevin question. We can create as much time as we need on that. I mean, construction needs to happen at some point, and we're going to need to step into design almost immediately. So getting that input on the front end is going to be critical and crucial. Sometime within the next year to year and a half, we would need to have that locked in and get that input from them, possibly even sooner than that. There are a couple of steps that would need to take place as we're currently designed with the project prior to the construction of the arena, but the design of the arena would commence relatively quickly upon approval, if it's approved in November.
Okay.
Any other questions, Council, for Tom?
Mayor, I would just like to add in that having served on that committee, I would just like to say that the projections that Tom and his company came overall, I would rank them very conservative. We had multiple conversations, and when we're doing economic projections, that it was what I interpreted from all of their presentations was not to overestimate. And so I think this issue with an anchor tenant falls into that as well, that absolutely it would be a huge benefit, but not to include that in the projections and the estimates, because if it did not come to pass, then that would have been a major negative in evaluating the feasibility of the project. And on that point, Tom, if you could just address again, and we've kind of touched on it, but the size of the arena, because I would say that is probably the number one question that I get from citizens is still that concern, is it big enough? And the difference between what a community might want versus need. And before you address that, just making the comment that the executive committee did go to the upper ranges of where your recommendations had begun expanding. We did not look at the minimum or even the average, went to the upper edge, and even a little bit beyond that, going over the 10,000 was above and beyond what was necessarily recommended and identified as a need for our community. But could you address that issue, please?
Sure. So an arena has many uses, and so the seating requirements for those different uses vary. And it's easy to build an arena that's too small or one that's too large. The problem with having an arena that's too large is not just sort of the inefficiency in the construction cost, but during the use, users want it to be sized appropriately for their potential audiences. They don't want their events to occur in an empty venue or what appears to be a half-empty venue. So there's a couple things that this building program does to address that. It will be flexible. Let's say you have a smaller concert. The arena will be able to be used in a half-hall configuration and accommodate a much smaller audience and will give a good user experience. In terms of sizing it for sports, we looked at all the various minor league sports potential, and we looked at what typical attendances are in those leagues, and what peak attendance might be. Let's say if you're in a playoff versus what your average game attendance might be, and so it's sized in order to address those needs as well. And so it will be quite flexible, and it will be able to accommodate a lot of different types of events depending on how the arena is used. So I think we've looked at all the potential markets for it and tried to create the right match in terms of capacity for those markets.
Mayor, I would also clarify my comment earlier. We're not locked into designing any component of the project immediately. The timing of all this is 100% up to council and what works best for the community. We had initially envisioned beginning design right off the bat as quickly as possible on all components. Construction, however, would begin in a sequence because certain things have to be done first. For example, at the Civic Center, before we can renovate some of the spaces that we currently use, we have to build the new space where we can push activities so that can free up the current space that's being used. Same concept with the arena. We have certain projects, demolition and utility projects that would have to happen prior to construction at the arena site. That said, there's no requirement for us to begin design at any given phase. There will be a follow-on effect if we push design backward a little bit to give us more negotiation time for an anchor tenant or something like that, to enable them to be part of the design process. But that's an option that's available to us. We do have as much flexibility as everyone wants, while we, at the same time, we do still have expectations as far as delivery timetables. But those are all self-imposed, so we do have the ability to be flexible as we go through that, depending on options that are available to us and things that we might want to chase down and run to ground before we initiate.
Okay, so Tom, can I ask you another question? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay. I was afraid my microphone wasn't working again. I'm sorry. So just for my own information, really. So like we've got in here where it says the basketball would be configured to 9,700 and for hockey it'd be configured to 8,600. So how do you, would you indulge me for a minute? How do you change that so that you configure it so that it holds more individuals or fewer individuals, so that you have you don't have a cavernous type or a arena that seems half empty? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. Yes, I understand what you're asking. So the biggest flexibility in terms of utilization comes for concert events, where you can move the stage around and use curtain systems to create a half-hall configuration. The other move that's often made is to close off certain sections, either end seats or second level for smaller events, so that you have the crowd is more contained. But I mean, there obviously when you're using the bowl, there's certain limitations as to how much you can shrink the venue. But usually it's a matter of just closing off sections to attendees, it's particularly upper level attendees in sections if necessary.
So one of the things we've discussed with the facility as proposed, and obviously it hasn't been designed yet, but when we have users that need less capacity, Some of our current sporting partners use less space than others. We will design. Currently our plans are to design it so that we can have a curtain system that will close off the upper deck so that it doesn't look empty. Whatever capacity they can use to fill the lower seats they'll look pretty full. It won't be obvious that there's used in certain situations. So we'll have the capacity to seal off a large chunk, and what Tom was saying, which is just close off certain sections.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that really makes sense. Let me ask you this. So if you changed the size of the capacity of seating and you went up 2,000 or you went down 2,000, does that really change the size of the bowl? Or does the bowl still basically have a configuration size that we're going to be in anyway? And so changing the seating capacity isn't as consequential as unless we're changing the whole size of the bowl.
We're getting into certain design questions, but I think there are two main considerations that you need to think about if you were, let's say, to expand the overall size of the venue. One is, will the site accommodate it if you have to expand the bowl? Because when you do that, you have to expand not just the bowl itself, but your concourse areas. You have to add more. There's a lot of other space that goes along with that. And then the second, of course, is a certain budget constraint. So there's a rough budget estimate associated with this project, and there's going to be a certain amount of money available, assuming the referendum's passed. So you need to work within that. So there will be those two. I think will place the major constraints on trying to expand it, let's say by a couple thousand seats. That may or may not be possible within those constraints. But again, you're getting into a design question, and that here Populous would be great to have on the phone to address those more directly.
We did have those questions with Populous with regard to building it to our current projection and then being able to expand in the future if it was needed. One of the challenges there was once you build to a certain size, it's very difficult to expand just because of the way the bowl goes up to the walls of the building. Otherwise, you build it with expansion space, but you're almost experiencing that full cost on the front end. It would be difficult to shrink it, after constructed, but I'm probably misunderstanding the question when I say that.
No, actually, that really is, I guess, really what the question is can you expand it, or would it be, or is it kind of like our current situation that we really couldn't just raise the roof on the current Coliseum to accommodate the 30?
We did ask the question of Populous, and their input there was the cost of that, in their experience, would far exceed the value of the expansion.
Yeah.
Some places are looking at reducing capacity. I understand that's something that Texas Tech is looking at with, I'm not sure exactly what it's called now, but formerly called United Spirit Arena. And I think what they're looking at doing is possibly taking some of the upper seats and turning them into suites. I don't know if that's because it's too large a capacity or they don't have enough suites, but I know that's something they're at least were looking at about a year ago. So there is some flexibility to reduce the capacity in that way. I would hope that when we design this, we put in the appropriate amount of suite space on the front end, so that we can avoid that incurring that cost at a later time.
Any other questions for Tom? Okay, Tom, we thank you again for your time and for your work on this project. It won't be the last time we have questions.
Okay, well, I'm glad to be here and glad to help if I can. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
See you all. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, we'll go back to the top of our agenda now, and that is item 1A, a coronavirus update. Mr. City Manager.
Right, Mayor, we're going to, like last week, begin with Casey Stoughton, Director of Public Health, and have her give us an update, and then we're going to move to Dr. Sauer and or Andrew Freeman to give us an update on where we're at with assistance programs. Casey.
Yes, good morning, or good afternoon now. Sorry. We're doing a number of things here, including virtual school. So been answering phone calls to get going on virtual school. So lots of newness this year. So as for an update from Public Health on COVID, as of today, there are a total of 6,334 cases of COVID-19 reported in Potter and Randall counties, 4,098 in Potter County, and 2,236 in Randall County. We have a total of 5,757 recoveries and an increase to 86 deaths reported in our community. That leaves us with 491 active cases. Hospital capacity includes 50 COVID positive patients hospitalized. Total adult bed utilization is at 71%. Ventilator utilization is at 36.5%. And total ICU utilization is at 73.5%. Each of the cases do represent a unique individual, and staff take the time out to take out duplicate tests as to not count multiple tests for the same person. And we at the Public Health Department only count those deaths that are because of COVID-19. For instance, if a person dies as a result of a car crash, but is also positive for COVID-19, that death would not count as a COVID death. We only count those deaths that would not have, that without COVID, the member of our community and our family would still be here. The CDC recently reported that the vast majority of individuals who die as a result of COVID have underlying health conditions. We analyzed a sample of the reported deaths reported to public health, and that's roughly half, with underlying health conditions. We analyzed a sample of our total reported deaths, and locally, 80% of those deaths do have underlying health conditions, such as hypertension or high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, obesity, those types of underlying health conditions. We will continue to analyze the data to have the full data set for tomorrow, but this information does highlight the need for protective measures, as the most vulnerable in our community are at risk for devastating outcomes. And for many in our communities, 86 families to be exact, this is a reality. We do need the normalcy in our community, especially with school starting today and businesses needing to stay open. However, we've got to do so with continued masking, social distancing, limited in-person meetings and gatherings, and a consideration for others until there's a vaccine. We've had new cases in the 30s and 40s in the early part of August. The latter part of August, we saw cases in the upper 40s and 50s. And today we have 92 new cases of COVID-19. So we do appreciate the need for continued measures.
Thank you, Casey. Y'all have any questions for Casey? Okay, Mr. City Manager.
Mayor, not specifically a question for Casey, but some more discussion related around COVID.
Sure.
We've been talking a little bit, beginning our conversations and kind of watching the governor's office and to information on metrics he might be looking for moving. And I just wanted to note that over the weekend, Governor Abbott had tweeted, "Since my last orders in July, COVID numbers have declined, most importantly, hospitalizations. I hope to provide updates next week about next steps." So I think that they are seeing some of that same data we're discussing and beginning to see that, so many of those metrics that we started with have been met. The 2 weeks of slowing the spread, trying not to be doubling our cases, flattening the curve. Here locally now, we've had several weeks in a row, 4 or 5, where we were under 500. we're achieving that flattening of the curve and certainly not overloading our hospitals. And as Casey highlighted, some of the national data that it is confirming there is a very clearly defined population that's at risk that can be protected with targeted measures. And that's our elderly, with the average age in deaths being at 75, and then those with underlying health conditions. And that recent data is certainly confirming that. There was another report of interest. In Casey, you may have some more information on this. It definitely is above my understanding level on infectious diseases. But another report out of the New York Times is that only 10% of positive COVID-19 cases actually have enough viral load to be infectious. So this may be kind of a new conversation or a new part of the testing. They're looking not only at the positive result, but the percentage of viral load to, I might test positive, but I might not be contagious. So again, these are positive. I see these as very positive movements towards understanding this virus more. We're learning more and more about it, how it's transmitted, how to treat it. We're seeing very positive results in new treatment. And just as a word of encouragement, to those families that are sending children back and addressing some of those concerns and fears. There was just a statistic that I had read recently that this was in June. I know some of the numbers have changed, but it's still talking about risk and relative risk. And in that age group of 15 and younger, this was nationally, 45 individuals that were younger than age 15 had died from COVID. And they may have had some additional underlying conditions as well. But during that same time period, there were 13,088 deaths from other causes. So there is a risk. It is a real risk. Relative to other risk that age group faces is still low. And I hope that that bit of data, as Mayor, you mentioned earlier, we like to make decisions based on data. And I'm hopeful that data is encouraging to our community and to our families.
I'll just add to that report that I had a tidbit of information this morning that the governor will be coming out with possible changes to his executive order after Labor Day. So it's possible that, first of next week, middle of next week, we could have some information out of Austin and out of the governor's office on how we may be changing what our businesses can do.
That is good to hear.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else for Casey or other comments on that data? Okay. Mr. City Manager? You are on mute, Jared.
Thank you. I'm going to throw it to Dr. Sauer.
Okay, so I'm just going to give a quick update on the COVID grant figures. In the public safety reimbursement program, there's been a total of 74 applications submitted, 154, almost 155,000. An average request is about 2,100. Total paid out so far is 101,000. And 14 of the 74 applicants are currently under review. Now then on the other one, the $10,000 grant application, we've received 50 applications, and we have budgeted $550,000 for those grants. 300,500 or 32 of those grants are good to fund. $40,000 worth of grants, or 4 of the grants, are almost ready to fund. We're just waiting for information back from the particular business or individual that has made an application. Now then, we've got another 7 that they've got to get more information, bring them back to the committee. That's 68,000, and we have denied or referred to the public safety reimbursement 4 different applications. And we've got 3 new applications that we haven't seen yet, and our next meeting will be a week from this Friday. So actually, there's the possibility that we have $438,500 that could be granted possibly by Friday week. So that means there's still $110,500 left for grants, and at $10,000 a piece, that would be another 10 or 11 businesses. And not everybody has asked for the entire amount. Several have asked for amounts smaller than the 10,000. So I think we've had really good response, and would love to have more businesses to go ahead and apply for this. And that's everything.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sauer. We appreciate that report, and we really appreciate all the time and effort that you and Kevin and everybody else that's worked on that team putting those programs together, and also the time you spend looking at the applications and moving it forward. It's helpful to every single one of those businesses, and I know they appreciate it, so we're grateful for your work.
Thank you.
Okay, Jared, back to you.
That is it on coronavirus. Right now we've got, if we're done, if there's no other questions on coronavirus, we can move to item B, which is an update on the traffic management system. This has been a multi-phase, multi-year process to modify and update our traffic management system. We've got Donnie Hooper along with Raymond Lee to give us a small presentation answering questions from council. Donnie?
And thank you so much, and good afternoon, Council. Good afternoon, Mayor, and thank you for having us today. We are excited about this project. We're nearing the final phase of this, which will begin in October in phase 4. We'd originally planned for today's, what we're going to do today, to have Council come to the Traffic Management Center when it was complete and when we had everything up and running so that we could show it off and spend some time with you there. We're really looking forward to that, but because of COVID, we were unable to do that. So we put our heads together and said, well, then we'll just take it to them and bring it to you virtually. So we actually put together a video that we're going to show you in just a moment. I will tell you that we tested the video 2 or 3 times, and we got the lagging problems out of it. With everybody logged on today, it could have a little bit of a lag to it. If it does, we'll make sure that every council member and you, Mayor, have a copy of that video, and we can also put that on YouTube for the citizens to be able to see as well. But before we get to that, just a quick update on where we're at. If you recall, phase 1 was our software and controllers in the Central Business District. That was completed in 2018. In 2019, we moved to the arterial controllers, also our TMC video work that's in the Traffic Management Center, along with putting all of our cellular communication devices up out in the field. Then we moved to phase 3, which is the current year we're in now, where we were putting our off-system controllers in, finishing up with our cellular modems and our detection systems and our pan, tilt, and zoom cameras at some of those locations. Phase 4, which is coming up in October, is a cleanup phase where we can go back in and we can take all of the intersections that we know that we need to put pan, tilt, and zoom cameras or video detection or radar detection. And I might note that when I say radar detection, that doesn't mean speed for the motorist. That means radar detection that's replacing some outdated technology and loop detectors that generally set inside of the pavement. They're high maintenance items. They now have technology where we can put radars up on the mast that can sense when traffic is in an intersection and waiting on a call to move when there's no traffic coming the other way. So we're just now getting into the very beginning stages of getting operational with our system, but it is up and running. We did have training about 2 weeks ago with all of the staff in the TMC with Iteris that came down. That was a very productive training session for about 4 days. And even in that, we found some issues that were out in the field that we wanted to address. And the Iteris engineers took those problems back with them to help us come up with some solutions at some intersections that we're having some difficulty with as far as controllers and phasing everything together. So very productive there. I do want to add before we show the video as well that this project, about $1.8 million total with the capital money that was already available when we started the project with 1.545 of bond money that was put toward this, that this project was done by the staff of traffic and traffic engineering. They completed all of the field work. The only thing that we really had was Iteris coming in, the software manufacturer coming in and working with us and getting everything installed. But without that and without them doing the work in the field, I would venture to say that we wouldn't be able to complete half the work that we've been able to complete on this project. So having those staff members that are available and able to do that work has been a tremendous asset to us, and I'm very proud of the work that they've been able to do over the past 3 years and look forward to finishing this up with them. So with that said, we'll move on to the video. And again, hopefully we won't have any lag, and Stephanie, I think, is going to put that up for us. And I'm going to mute my microphone so that it doesn't feedback when the volume comes on with that video.
Okay, I am sharing right now. Give me 1 second. I need to reshare. I forgot to click a button. This is our first time sharing with something with sound. I want you guys to be able to hear it.
The all-new Traffic Management Center is located in a secured area of the Sims building and is near the Emergency Operations Center, which is by design so that we could use technology of our live camera system in the event of an emergency or crisis situation to give eyes to the command staff or of the current situation where possible. The goal of this major upgrade was to create a better driving experience for motorists in Amarillo and to declutter areas of congestion.
So some of the capabilities we have with this system is we have access to all 283 signalized intersections, and we can access video camera on some of them, and Phase 4 will complete the rest of the video on all of them, but we can upload, download, get any kind of information as far as if loop detectors are working properly, if the timings are not right.
The advantage to the system is I'll be able to live monitor things and make adjustments on the fly, as well as when there are events at Hodgetown or the Civic Center, whenever there's a lot of traffic coming into town, we will be able to change it here rather than go to every intersection and change it at the control block.
The new traffic management system controls 283 signalized intersections, also 5 flashing red lights, 2 emergency signals installed at fire stations, 3 flashers at fire stations, and 2 Hawk pedestrian crossings. The system also controls 18 pan, tilt, and zoom cameras, 21 radar detection units, 2 video and radar combination units, and 16 video detection intersections.
So in Phase 4, some of the new video detection that we're going to be adding has the capabilities to bring us live counts from each intersection, and with those counts we'll be able to adjust red lights and green lights immediately.
The new traffic management system replaces an outdated traffic system that was installed almost 30 years ago. Technology has made great strides in the traffic world since then.
It's really exciting. Last time we had any new system was in 1991, and then it turned up to the new software in 2001. So it's totally different. Everything's different. New technology.
I'll be able to come in and check it first thing in the morning and see if I can make any adjustments to any intersections that may have had issues overnight. If not, we can get somebody out there and hopefully get those issues resolved.
The capabilities are unreal what we can do down the road. Right now we're getting into the beginning stages. It's a little bit different than our old system, but it's kind of similar. So a lot of the capabilities are completely different. The flexibility is huge for some of the stuff that we can do down the road. We can implement a lot of our GIS software and programs into it and be able to actually keep inventory of all our signals, create interactive maps that can be sent out to it actually be posted on the web and sent out to other departments to give people direct access to be able to look at stuff immediately without taking control of any traffic part. We just be able to view and access it. We're in the beginning stages of this. It's a really top of the line system that we're going to end up with when we're done.
Not as good as being there in person, but hopefully that at least gives you a look inside the center to see what we have. Andrew Martinez, by the way, we give him a hard time. Hey, you're the first one that's ever been the traffic management center technician in the new center, so don't let us down. Andrew's doing a great job down there. So is Michael Padilla and the rest of his staff. I might mention that we did learn from Iteris that there are some other cities that have the same system, and they actually are using it as an interactive system as well for citizens to be able to see some of the data and some of the things online that we're going to be able to provide them. That's still in the infancy stages there, and we're looking at what some other cities are doing. And I think we're going to have some opportunities down the line to even increase it even more with things like that. So that's pretty much our presentation. We do have phase 4 coming up. We have about $349,000 left in the project, and that sounds like a lot of money, but when we really look at $16,000 per intersection to put radar detection and tilt-and-zoom cameras and detection cameras, it's about 22 intersections that we could upgrade. So we're still analyzing how we're going to utilize all of that in phase 4, which gets underway in October. But I can answer any questions if you have any. And again, thanks for the opportunity to let us show you inside.
Questions?
The main thing I heard, and that was the 1991.
1991 with an upgrade, I believe, in 2001. But really, that was the same system, and it just, I think I mentioned this to council before, but everyone was afraid when they walked in that room that old computer that was in there couldn't be upgraded to stomp on the floor too hard when they were walking, or it would have to be rebooted. So, and I might mention that a new system like this compared to the old system, our complaints have dropped dramatically. I mean, we're still going to have some complaints that come in about intersections, and we certainly understand that, are going to react to those, but the complaints have really, really dropped significantly.
Great. Great report, Donnie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions, council? Donnie, who put the video together?
I did.
You did. Wow. Well, you're setting the standard, because you might have a new traffic management coordinator, but now I think we got a new presentation standard here. Digital times require digital presentations.
I told Jordan that I was going to try to not one-up him on this, and he just said, "Don't worry about it, you won't." So we're glad to do it.
Well, we
know that we're busy with everything in communication, so we just took it on our own to do it.
Yeah, they definitely are busy in communications, but we really appreciate the opportunity to see that project and to hear the goal of it, what it cost. When was the last time? You just answered a lot of questions about it, and I'd really love to have a link to that video to put on my Facebook page, just so citizens can watch it and get that same information.
We'll make sure you have that, and thank you for the compliment.
Yeah, thank you, Donnie. Okay, next item. Item 1C, a discussion on the proposed Convention and Visitors Bureau. Mr. City Manager?
All right, Mayor. We've been talking for and working very aggressively for the last few weeks on plans that will enable the Convention and Visitors Council to become its own entity. We're catching up with a lot of cities our size. We were a little bit unique in that we were contracting with another entity, the Chamber of Commerce in this case, to operate and provide CVC functions as an operating department of the Chamber of Commerce. But we're working through the process of enabling the CVC plan to be the Convention and Visitors Bureau, which is a very common designation for convention and visitor activities across the state, to be its own entity. We've had a team leading that. At the front of that team is Floyd Hartman and Cashin Smith. Floyd, Assistant City Manager, Cashin Smith, head of things over at the CVC. And there's going to be a number of steps that we need to take. There's going to be a timeline. We're going to have to seek some input from council today on some things that will enable us to finalize some documents that will be in front of you in the near future to approve. So with that said, I want to go ahead and hand it. Before I hand it to Floyd, this is a pretty complicated project. We have a great team working on it, but it's not as simple as saying, okay, you're over there now. There's a lot of legal documents that have to be performed. There's a lot of legal steps that the council is going to have to take, along with coordination and administrative efforts that the CVC, CVB, in tandem with the city of Amarillo, is going to have to take in order to make this happen efficiently and effectively. So it's all that to say, it's not an easy or snap of the fingers type deal. It's very, I won't say complicated, but it is very. There's a lot of steps you have to take to make sure that everything's appropriate and legal. So all of this to say that we're going to help CVB capture savings that they might be able to get by working more closely with the city for administrative costs and things like that, and also to enable the CVB to just step into that new role, that expanding role that they're going to have as a standalone entity. So Floyd, take it away. And then after the presentation, we're going to answer any questions the council might have.
Thank you, Jared. And yes, I want to let you know that Cashin Smith is on the presentation. Will be available for comments and questions as we get through. So Stephanie, if you'll go to the next page, slide. So one of the things we're trying to accomplish, we engaged, it's challenging with COVID, but we've engaged the stakeholders to find out what the major concerns are in moving forward. And these recommendations that we have that you'll see first thing next week is the articles of incorporation. But they align with other entities within the state and the best practices for CVBs, which is a change. So Stephanie, if you'll go to the next slide. So one of the first things that we have to do is create and it was preferred from the stakeholders to be a standalone entity with the articles of incorporation. With that, it would consist of a new board, a governing board, rather than an advisory board, and that board would have more direct decision-making authority. We are going to recommend, based off what we saw across the state, a 9-voting member board with 2 non-voting ex officio members to maintain the uniqueness of Amarillo, which is the input from a director of Center City and the director of the Civic Center. But all of those positions, it's a new board, would be created, and our plan would be, if we move forward, to have that in front of council on September 22nd. After the initial appointment, those board members would be appointed annually, and there would be 3 terms to expire on December 31st of each year, 2021, 22, and 23, thus staggering those terms. So Stephanie, if you'll go to the next slide. What we see, though, we'll have to additionally to have a functional entity on October 1. We will also have the CVB budget for you, fiscal services contracts such that payroll can be met and other procurement requirements can be met, legal services contract, and an office lease. And we anticipate all of that on September 22nd. So the next slide. So the most important piece of all of this is you can see that we met with the director on the 21st. We're moving forward with accepting applications for new board members. We anticipate the article of incorporation in front of City Council for discussion and consideration next week. We anticipate closing that application period for board members on September 17th. Again, we'll have all those administrative contracts before you on September 22nd, which in the end will result in a functioning board on October 1 to meet and have their first meeting and set up the basics to be an operational entity, which would be that governing board and creating that entity. So that's an overview of where we're at, what you can anticipate next week. Cashin is on to give you comments, and we're open for questions from there.
Questions, council?
So, Cashin, so what I'm hearing is that every year there will be at least 3 board members that would be up for appointment. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes. So to set it to where it staggers so that we're not changing our board completely out all at once.
Definitely understand that. Thank you.
So can you walk through just the timeline of that? If all 9 are going to be appointed, September 22nd, October 1st, then how does that rotation work if you're doing 3? It's going to be 3, 3, and 3, 2-year terms.
Well, to start the board, it would actually be, I guess the first 3 would be about 15 months because they would start on October 1st, but then they wouldn't expire until the following January. That way they would be on the city council's calendar of rotation and give a little over a year for those first 3 seats. And then the next 3 the following year. So there's only 3 positions out of the first 9 that are appointed that would actually do a full 3-year term the first time around.
Yeah, so they're going to be appointed to different lengths of term to start. So you're going to have to appoint 3 to a 1-year term, 3 to a 2-year term, and 3 to a 3-year term. So that'll be a nuance for you all in November or December, whenever we do our here very, very soon when you make the appointments.
Okay, so that was the clarification. They are, in the long run, 3-year terms.
Yes.
We're staggering in to get that. And so what are the current? Wow, I am echoing big time on my end. I don't know if anyone else is.
It's not too bad. Badly.
Let's have everyone mute who's not speaking. And then if you want to speak, you can just hit your space bar and that'll unmute you while you're making a comment.
So currently we have 17 positions. Some of those come from city council appointments. We have chamber appointments, and then all of our committee chairs actually have a position on the board. Those are 3-year terms, and they rotate. So some of the committee chairs will rotate a little different, like if they're already on the board, and then take over one of the committees, it may adjust their position a little bit. But yeah, for 3 years. And I think last year we were really intentional about trying to roll off some of the people who had served many terms and been on for a long time. So most of our board is pretty new.
Councilmember Hayes, to your question, this would be the only time that council would make any appointments to this board that were not for 3-year terms, unless you're filling an unexpired term, and then you're just appointing someone to fill that unexpired term, someone who got off the board prematurely. But this will be the only time, so that we can create that staggering effect. This is the reason for a 1-, 2-, and 3-year appointment at this moment. But at next year, when we're refilling those 1-year terms, they will be appointed. Those new people will be appointed to a 3-year term.
Thank you. And you clarified the other part of my question is that we currently do have 3-year terms. And so we will get back on that same rotation. And then are there conversations about kind of the design of that board, representation from different parts of the community, whether they would be guidelines, requirements? Can you address that?
So what we're looking at right now is to have 3 positions for hoteliers, 2 positions for tourism partners. So that could actually be a hotelier, an attraction, say a marketing company that is focused in tourism, marketing, those types of positions throughout the community. We have 2 professional, and with what I have in mind would be like an auditor, a lawyer, things that may fit with something we see coming up that we might have challenges with and would like to have some guidance and governance on. And then 1 at large, citizen, and a city council member. Those would be the voting members. And then the ex officio would be a civic center, the general manager and the executive director of Center City.
Any other questions, comments on the?
And what we'll do is we'll send out to council this week, prior to having anything in front of you for action, for your review, the draft documents, the draft compositions of the board, and so that you have time to review and provide comments, so that we can incorporate those comments, whether it's for next Tuesday or before final approval. We want you to have an opportunity to review if possible. So we'll send those out as soon as possible this week. Would likely be very soon.
Okay. Howard, do you have a question? I think you're on mute.
Would you describe this as similar to the LGC?
I'd say cross between LGC and AEDC, similar to the 2, okay, but different from both. Taking characteristics from both, yes.
Okay, anybody else?
We've also taken notes from other convention and visitor operations across the state as we put this proposal together.
And I I would like to say, we know that this is a very big change. We've been very mindful of how this sets us for success and made sure that we've had the conversations that we need to be having to make sure that we're considering what sets us in the best path forward. So it's an exciting change, but there is a lot of moving parts to it. We know that it's moving very fast. Whenever you look at the processes that other cities have taken when they have taken their CVB independent. So we've had very deep conversations about making sure that we're considering some of the things that they didn't in the beginning so that we have a smooth transition.
Ashton, we appreciate your work on all of this. And I would just call out the city manager as well as Floyd's effort. It's not an impossible task, but there are a lot of small details to get this done. And the time frame that we were granted to do it in as a result of COVID was not a long one. So you guys have definitely picked up all the pieces and filled out the puzzle work as quickly as you can. And I'm not surprised, but I am very proud that you're going to hit the October 1, which is the beginning of the fiscal year. That was the deadline. And y'all are going to make that target and get started with the new CVB. And we're really proud of all the effort that's gone into making the changes. So good job, Jared. Good job, Floyd. Good job, Cashin. And good job to everybody that worked on all the details with you guys.
Yeah, good team.
Thank you.
And Cashin, I just wanted to compliment you on at this most recent CVC meeting, the question had come up related to allocation of resources. Obviously this year is there's a smaller amount of resources to be allocating, and you were asked a question, and your response was, well, that will be a board decision of setting those priorities and determining how to allocate those limited amount of resources. And I think that is really good leadership and understanding a policy change, and that policy change of going to a governing board to put those type of decisions before them. And so I think you were headed in a really good direction, and that just gave me insight into how you're seeing this entity move forward and the operation, and I support it 100% in your leadership there.
Well, thank you. Our staff definitely welcomes the relationships with the board members and the different parts of the community that it will bring into our office. So we look forward to that.
Okay, thank you, Cashin. We'll move on then to agenda item 1D. Discussing the governor's executive order related to city council meetings. Mr. City Manager.
All right, Mayor. This was an item requested by council, so we can just discuss my plans and also your plans for how we're going to continue forward with city council meetings in our climate. As we've talked earlier during the coronavirus update, that climate could be clarifying. It could be moving towards a resolution, but at this point we are not at a point where we're outside executive orders and outside challenges with coronavirus. Given that, the governor's executive order, and so here what I'm going to do is describe the mindset and the philosophy behind the way we are currently doing meetings, and then also the philosophy and mindset towards when would we look at least in my mind, when would we look at moving toward in-person city council meetings. So the governor's executive order is the only thing that allows currently remote or virtual city council meetings. Outside of that, we would be meeting in person. The reason for the allowance through the governor's executive order recognized some of the unknowns with coronavirus, and some of those things, like we talked about earlier, are beginning to resolve themselves, or at least become a little bit more clear and less mystic. But it recognizes that a number of people, both guests, staff, and council members, are susceptible, whether they're in a high-risk category or not. Our current council chambers across the state are not really designed to facilitate attendance and presentations, and then all the people that have to be in the chamber while still social distancing. So that's a challenge for us right now. My intent would be to continue utilizing or meeting in accordance with the governor's executive order, utilizing the permission to do virtual meetings for the very reason that our council chamber is not designed to accommodate the number of people that need to come to council meetings while still social distancing. The primary people there that are not able to social distance are the council members themselves, but also that affects anybody that would attend the meeting. We are doing a couple of in-person meetings as part of the budget process. The reason for that is because there's not clarity between state statute as it regards how the tax rate is set and the governor's executive order that clearly says the council can take care of city business virtually. So because we have that lack of clarity or potentially even conflict, we're going to go and take the most conservative route we can, ensuring that we're compliant with state statute and handle those meetings in person. We're only going to do the items that are required or that have a potential conflict associated with them in person. Then everything else is going to be handled as we have been doing virtually. The reason for doing those meetings in person, despite it being a little bit different from what the governor has allowed through the executive order, is just to address those conflicts. But there are certain compromises. They're going to be in much larger rooms to allow social distancing. The rooms that are not necessarily or not at all set up for effective and efficient broadcast of the city council meeting. We'll put in a workaround so that we can get something broadcast and so that we can get sound. But there are complications there of making that work in larger rooms. So we will have a workaround that will enable us to broadcast, but still enable social distancing while we're having the meeting, while we're conducting the meeting. We will also have protocols in place to ensure that guests, staff, and everyone else is adhering to the governor's orders requiring masks and also social distancing. With that said, I would anticipate, the next question would be, when do you anticipate that at least as far as what I'm recommending, that we would move back to in-person meetings? And I would say that that's going to either be when the governor removes the executive order allowing virtual meetings, or when we have a vaccine where we feel confident that staff, public, and that's in the wrong order, public, council, and staff can attend meetings with high confidence level that we're not making situations worse. We know that meetings are operating very effectively, much more effectively than I anticipated they would in a virtual format, but we do lose some of our context when we're not beside each other and in person. So that's my thoughts. I'm very much open to answer any questions you have or to bring on Brian McWilliams, our city attorney, to assist with anything from a legal standpoint.
Questions, and you guys may, as council members, have had questions from the community or people in the community about when we'll meet in person again. And so I wanted you to have a chance to visit with the city manager about it, for the five of us to hear the same information at the same time. Okay, no questions. Let's move on then to the next thing on our agenda, which is we've already done. Let's see, no, we're at item 1E, discussion on annexation, development, infrastructure costs, and related city policies. Mr. Seaman.
Hi, Mayor. We don't really have a plan for an extensive presentation of any kind on this. Really, more than anything else, this is a follow-on conversation from last week's action to allow the current annexation that we're discussing to move forward toward consideration next week on first reading. The foundation of the conversation is we have a number of annexations that will be coming very soon, very large annexations, some of them some distance from our existing city limits. The annexations historically have been supported by our existing tax base or by increased taxes. They have not been, so there has been some incentive, or in other words, the city has provided an incentive to the developer in order to build those developments. And the annexations, or the areas annexed and the developments associated in or developed in them, did not generate enough revenue to the city to pay for the costs associated with that annexation being brought into the city. So the conversation really revolves around how do we facilitate future development while ensuring that it is financially viable to bring in those areas into our existing city without it being a an additional cost to our existing residents. As it's currently structured and as our current policies sit or are currently constructed, very rarely does an annexation take place that isn't subsidized by existing residents or existing city resources. So it's essential for us to have or I feel, I don't want to overcharacterize it, but I think it's important for us to have a conversation about how do we put the development protocols in place and the resource protocols in place to be able to ensure that future developments can take place in an effective and efficient way, and make sure that they're financially viable. This is something that I would recommend that we embark upon a process that would be facilitated by a consultant who's a pro in development protocols, development standards, zoning, and well, really zoning so much, but in helping to identify resources and protocols that would ensure that the development is financially viable for the community going forward. For example, the project that we're looking at right now and that we will be considering next week is a little bit upside down, but it's the least upside down of anything we've seen recently or will see going forward as far as we can tell. So it's a conversation that is appropriate now. I think it's an important conversation for our development partners because they're the ones that will benefit most by a smooth and streamlined process that will enable development at any point in any place in our two-county area. Because we straddle two counties and because we have a neighboring city very close by that rises and falls along with the city of Amarillo, we rise and fall together. I would recommend that if we do embark on a process to work out development standards and protocols that will facilitate financially viable developments going forward, I would recommend that we also partner with the city of Canyon, with Randall County, and with Potter County, so that this project and process will result in relatively consistent protocols or very consistent protocols. You know, some of the revenue and resource management is going to be a little bit different because we all have different costs associated with providing services. And the revenues generated through the process is going to have to be appropriate for each jurisdiction individually. However, that process to create it we can all realize significant cost savings by all doing it at the same time and by all making sure that our standards are very similar. So what I would recommend and gladly and really look for any input and conversation the council has is one direction. What does council want us to do regarding annexation costs associated with serving new parts of our community, and how do we make sure that it's viable? I think the way that I've proposed, which is using a consultant to work with us, it'd be a somewhat time-consuming process, probably around 18 months to get through the process. But working with our development community, having them be part of the process, having our neighboring jurisdictions be a key and critical part of the process, having our citizens be part of the process, and identifying a way to make sure that adequate resources are available be able to be brought in very efficiently so that we are not slowing down development. That's one thing that development frequently and legitimately says, is that our processes slow things down. And part of that is that we don't have the resources to provide the infrastructure that they need for that development. So it will speed things up for developers. It will make things more easier for developers because standards will be similar or the same from jurisdiction to jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And it will clearly articulate the process that they need to follow to be able to have a development in the ground and making money for them. So what are your thoughts? And I will take your consensus on this. If there's guidance for us, we can go ahead and initiate something like that. But we would definitely, it's very important that everyone understand that I think the only way to find a successful way forward in a process like this is to make sure that we have representation in the process from all vested parties. And that's very much going to include our development partners and our jurisdictional partners.
Council, questions, thoughts?
And I should have mentioned we also have Floyd Hartman and Andrew Freeman, who are very much in the weeds on conversations like this, very informed, in addition to myself, to answering questions council has.
Andrew, could you point out the concessions that were achieved in this current annexation that is still on the council agenda, that is new from previous partnerships, annexation agreements.
The main one that's being considered was the fire station, participation in a future fire station cost, but we're actually evaluating that a little bit in more detail before we bring it back to you next week, just to make sure that we've got that squared away, and if it is necessary that this current annexation is triggering that or not. So we're still fine-tuning that before next week.
Yeah,
that was the main portion.
Yeah, we're wanting to refine and make sure that our mutual aid agreements with Randall County and other things wouldn't render an additional fire station, at least with regard to that development, unnecessary. So that affects how upside down the calculations are, and could potentially pull as much as $4 million or so off that upside down number.
That would be significant. This is a conversation that we've really been having for the last 3 years. And just looking at the reality of the long-term sustainability of development and annexation, that you can't continually continue with annexation when you're upside down. And I think having those conversations of saying, this is how we're calculating it, this is how we're trying to estimate what the costs to the city are, short-term, long-term, and to have the developers weigh in on that conversation and to be able to counter that, to say, you've overlooked this, there is a different revenue stream, whatever. Having those, being at the table together to go to either confirm our position of that it does put the city in a negative cash flow, even long term, versus if there is part of the conversation that we are missing. I think it is crucial to moving forward in a healthy financial path for the city, and definitely support getting people to the table. And Mr. City Manager, I think your point on that, it has to be a partnership with the city of Canyon, Randall and Potter counties, or you just divert development and you can't have something consistent and cohesive. You're just going to restrict development in your own area if you don't have input from all of those governmental entities.
And I think there would always be the opportunity for for us or anyone else in the process to be able to justifiably incentivize a development. In other words, participate in the cost of a development beyond what they normally would, if that development is going to bring something uniquely beneficial to the community. For example, a master planned community that also is going to have a business park and have a business headquarters or something like that, where you're going to be generating jobs, enhanced property values, things like that. But so it wouldn't be completely cut and dry as to, is a city able to participate in a project beyond the resources that project is generating. I absolutely think that's not the case, but it would be the rule that the rules that we go by, and there is opportunity for exception in exceptional situations.
And I think the timeline that you're discussing, it's not real long-term, that this isn't something that changes direction overnight. And I think in fairness to our business community, our developers, you have to have a timeline for them to allow for changing a business model and that partnership with the city, for them to be making decisions on what to develop or not, or to not develop. And this, I do feel this is moving us in the right direction. I appreciate all the work, Andrew, that you've been doing over the last 2 years and having these conversations. It's something that, in my perspective, is something we have to do as a city. And I feel like we're moving in the right direction.
Well, it can be a very complicated conversation. I mentioned 18 months, and that's a little bit of an estimate, because it can be every bit as complicated as our zoning project that we're currently working through, and that was estimated at a longer project. and probably will be a little bit of a longer project. However, depending on how efficient we can be and what common ground we can establish with all of the different parties associated in the project, we can cut time there. But I'm estimating off the top of my head, and in some conversations with others, around 18 months, give or take. But there are a lot of things that are going to be discussed. We're going to look at all of the different impacts associated with development, impacts on the community, impacts on the city organization. And we'll look at revenues associated that might be able to offset those impacts. Definitely be looking at different traffic impacts that different developments bring, because each development is going to have a different intensity, different traffic flows. So a traffic impact analysis process is going to be part of that. We'll also be looking at pardon me, I had some notes and I lost them. We're also going to be looking at different pro rata ordinances, or possibly utilizing PIDs in certain situations, street maintenance. Obviously, we've already looked at drainage fees, and we'll have to continue to look at that going forward as we add projects to our drainage project plan, because our current drainage fee to do some very specific drainage projects that we've identified. So that's all of those things we're going to have to look at, and all of those people are going to have different opinions on. We want to recognize and appreciate those different opinions, give enough time for us to be able to work to a workable, sustainable program going forward. Sorry, Mayor, I kind of jumped on you there.
That's okay. Cost estimate, Jared, I know that Lubbock has recently done a project like this.
Lubbock recently did a similar project that cost them, and I want to say it was a couple of years ago, it cost them $266,000. I would say that this will cost us a similar amount. We're a little bit smaller, but it is farther along the road. But that's just for the Amarillo jurisdiction. As we look at a 4-jurisdiction project, I would expect this to cost anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000, with all entities paying a pro rata share. Understand that we have not really had detailed conversations with them, so we'll be reaching out to them. At the very least, we need to do the city of Amarillo. But I think it would be very efficient and a very wise thing for all of our jurisdictions to be able to partner together. Probably not, speaking of wise, the wisest thing to propose that they participate without having actually talked to them about it. We have had some conversations with Randall County and with the city of Canyon, and also had some very quick conversations with the Potter County judge. But we definitely would want to have more substantive conversations with them in a very short order, in order to hopefully kick off a project very quickly.
Any other questions about that, Council? Is this the kind of thing that we would be interested in seeing the staff pursue? What do you think?
I think we need to. The only question I have, you mentioned Potter and Randall counties. I'm wondering, this might complicate it more, but the metropolitan statistical area, should it include the other counties?
It gets a lot more complicated when you have more partners. All of our development-related interactions, we really have almost no development interactions with those other counties. It doesn't mean that a develop in those counties, but the proximity to the city of Amarillo is really what pulls the area. So we have no regulatory responsibility there. We have zero, well, I don't want to say zero, but none of the interactions that we have with any of our neighboring counties outside of Potter and Randall have made it to my desk. We have had frequent discussions about how to coordinate development, especially in the Randall County ETJ, but also in Potter County. And then also within the city limits or in areas that would request to be annexed into the city of Amarillo in both Randall and Potter counties. So we're trying to hit the most frequent areas where we need to have a very high level of coordination. And that's really the reasoning for targeting Randall County, Potter County, and the city of Canyon in addition to the city of Amarillo area.
Any other questions or comments? Those are good questions. Okay. I think you have a consensus, Mr. City Manager, to move forward on bringing a proposal back to the council that has a more specific price tag to it and a timeline for how you want to proceed.
Yeah, next steps. Obviously, we're going to have to have some based on this feedback, it gives us the guidance we need to be able to initiate some very more directed conversations with all of the potential partners in the process. And once we have done that and gotten some buy-in on that, then we'll be working with doing an RFP, request for proposals, for consultants to be able to guide and assist us through the process. It's going to require somebody with a lot of experience to be able to manage 4 jurisdictions and a very large area when we're talking about development standards and processes. So the first thing we're going to do is have some high-level coordination meetings with our neighboring jurisdictions. We'll keep you updated on how those conversations are going, and then we'll be working through an RFP process. That will, again, be in front of you for approval, so you will have opportunity to ask more questions or provide more input at multiple points along the process.
Okay, let's move on to item 1G, which is a presentation on Economic Development Administration grant opportunity for John Stiff Memorial Park.
All right, to present the item, we've got Parks and Recreation Director Michael Kashuba, along with Dustin Meyer with PRPC.
Mayor and Council, I want to thank you for the opportunity to present this today. I am having some difficulty with my camera, so it may or may not work the entire time. But what we wanted to do is talk about a grant opportunity to develop undeveloped portions of John Stiff Memorial Park. We will be bringing a resolution to Council next week for your consideration. And so we wanted to talk through kind of the history of how we got to this point, what the grant covers or may cover, and also some concepts of what it could look like. I want to first off start by thanking Dustin Meyer and Kyle Ingham with PRPC for their help with this, but also Andrew Freeman and Matt Thomas. So with that, what I'd like to do is walk through kind of the history of the real estate study that we did for John Stiff Memorial, and then some of the design concepts. So the real estate study was conducted in early 2019 after there was some private interest in undeveloped portions of the park. The staff conducted an real estate study with Economic and Planning Systems in 2019. And what that real estate assessment did was it really looked at 4 things: market condition and demand, evaluation of potential uses, estimate of land value, and then development framework and strategy. So what we're really going to focus on is that last piece of the puzzle. So the real estate study itself had some different findings, and so we're going to just summarize those very quickly. So the first point was that the southwest portion of Amarillo is capturing the largest portion of new housing and households with larger or higher than average incomes. And so as a result, there's a growing demand for additional retail, entertainment, and other services within that service area. So that service area that was included in the study looked at Helium to the west, 34th to the north, Western to the east, and Hollywood to the south. Recreational and entertainment businesses are an attractive option for those out parcels, but trying to find a good partner might be a challenge. And per the study, general and retail and commercial would generate the highest affordable land values. So according to the project study, there was really 2 main objectives for any development that was to happen. Number 1, to provide additional amenities for park users, whether it's at JSM or within our park network. And number 2, to create revenue as a way to supplement our capital improvements. And so those are really the 2 project objectives that were identified in this study. Obviously, with the location, there are some concerns, and so looking at things that impact or detract from our main focus of the park, anything that creates or produces a substantial negative impact on traffic flow or congestion, things that just aren't compatible with the neighborhoods, and also things that create noise or potential light impacts on the area. So some of the attributes that we were considering as a part of this project would be things that only focus on those excess portions, those undeveloped portions of property within the park. If there was the disposal of land, it would only occur when it would facilitate enhanced operations for our department. One of the recommendations is that all the generation of funds would go back to support park operations, whether it's at John Stiff Memorial or our park network as a whole, and that those projects should seek to create revenue participation in exchange for public investment or land. and really looking at those long time periods. A couple other attributes, obviously, city maintain ownership and control of those development opportunities. We obviously want to make sure that whatever we consider for that site would be successful long term, and that we're protecting any kind of public investment, and that again, that it's consistent with city policies and also the neighborhood studies that have been conducted. And one final thing is just to make sure that the ability to use public funds to support the upfront implementation of this was another suggestion. So as we look at the project, what we're proposing as a part of this grant would be the infrastructure improvements that are kind of highlighted on the north, or the top of the screen, so the darker road connection. As a part of the grant, what we would be looking at is infrastructure improvements that would facilitate those potential leases. So road improvements, sewer improvements, water improvements, things that would allow us to further develop those spaces. We created kind of a conceptual plan of what it could potentially look like. So along the frontage, you already have your library and you have the fire station. Those are existing facilities, and we would consider those to be like a pad site. So what we would be doing is infilling around the edges with potential lease spaces. So you would have lease spaces along 45th, along Parkside, and then also the potential to have some lease space interior to the park. The white is the area, or the white road is the area that we would be proposing to include as a part of the grant application. So again, adding the infrastructure to support those developments. As you can see, it ties into the existing park network there at Parkside, and then in order to make the traffic pattern work a little bit better, it would actually redo this part of the Kawadi Trail, this little loop. Again, another benefit is you can see the blue star up at the top. We think there's a real potential for a connection, a pedestrian connection across 45th. If we're realigning the traffic patterns, we think that might be a good opportunity to allow for bicycles and pedestrians to cross over 45th and into the park. So what we're proposing is, again, those lease spaces in yellow. What we think is important for a project like this would be shared spaces. And I think what makes this project work would be those shared spaces. And I'm going to show a couple of examples of what that could look like, but really the blurring of private development and park spaces. So again, anything that's built would supplement or benefit the park users. So I'll leave this up if there's any questions on this before I go into a couple renderings and ideas. But this is a general layout of how we think the development could work. And again, I think the most important part are going to be those orange areas, which are those buffer spaces, those shared spaces between the private and the park. Any questions before I move forward?
Michael, I have a question while this image is up. So the purple line that goes underneath, which are areas that are actually roads? What is current? What would be projected? And I'm just kind of, what is the purple curve? So
the purple line that kind of works its way through is our existing park road. So what we would be doing in order to facilitate better traffic flow is we would be changing the pattern right there where you see the connection right here at Parkside, and then also over here on the west side of the park, closer to McDonald's Lake. There's a curve that naturally happens there now, and so we would just be straightening out that road just to allow better traffic control. So the rest of the purple road, or the magenta, is actually the existing infrastructure in place. So we would just be proposing to upgrade more of the white portion of the road.
So is an upgrade meaning widening it, resurfacing it? Can you define upgrade?
So what we've looked at, and we're still working through it with engineering in terms of what the final design looks like, but what we anticipate there is like a boulevard where you've got a landscaped island in the middle, and then you've got road on either side. So it would be a nice boulevard that would go through the park. But the good thing is you could also close portions of it off based on this design if we were to do events in the park. So you could close it off right here at this T intersection, and also over here at Parkside, so that all of this space really blurs together, so that you don't have those physical barriers or traffic issues if you were to host an event in this space. So it really allows for a lot of flow back and forth between the sites. And again, these areas that are highlighted up here on the north and also here on the west are undeveloped portions of the park. They're parts of the park that right now are just in a natural state, with the exception of obviously the library and the fire station. So we would be going in and making some improvements as a part of these lease agreements. So if we were to take just kind of a high level, and again, this is not 100% accurate, it's more of a conceptual drawing, is you can see that the development kind of occurs around the edges, and right here in the middle is what we're really trying to create, and that's that social space. One of the ideas is, and I'll go to it here in a second, is to create just more opportunities for people to recreate, whether they're in the park or whether they're visiting those tenants. Some examples of what that could look like. Obviously, we've pulled some from some different companies that have a model very similar to this. So things like Chicken and Pickle, where there's a restaurant, but there's also pickleball that's associated with it. So the ability to have probably some private courts, but also some courts that may be open to the public. So somebody using the park could go utilize a couple of those courts. Same thing with, obviously, the Vine House here in Denver. They have bocce courts where you could have something like that indoor, but possibly also something outdoor for the park user. And then obviously the example down below is the sandbar cantina, so it's more of a sand volleyball option. And we're not sold on any particular model, but what we think is that blended space, that shared space, really has the potential to make this a very unique development. So not only offering retail opportunities for the community, but also significantly enhancing the park experience for those that are using our park. So it would actually add amenities to our park and to park users, but also add some other elements like retail or commercial that obviously our community could support as well. So what I'd like to do is I'll just go back so you can kind of see how that might play out. So obviously these orange spaces would be that space where their back of house would merge with our park. So whether that's additional pickleball courts, bocce courts, sand volleyball courts, whether it's a putt-putt, it's opportunities for people using the park to have a bigger and better experience while partnering with those private developers. So with that, that's kind of the high-level concept. And this is something that obviously we've looked at JSM because the real estate study was done for this particular park. I think there's a very good potential that we could take this model and apply it at Rick Klein as it relates to more of an athletic model. You could do it at Thompson with more of an amusement park / entertainment model, since that's how it's kind of currently situated. And I think this becomes more of a social space / social recreation. So I think each regional park could carry its own set of characteristics that wouldn't compete with each other, but would allow for us as a department to partner with private business. With that, what I'd like to do is I'll turn it over to Dustin Meyer with the PRPC to really talk through more of the nuts and bolts on the grant, and then I'll circle back and fill in and answer any questions.
All right, great. Thank you, Michael. Can everybody hear me okay?
Sure.
Great. Just to give you guys a little bit of a background on this grant opportunity, the Economic Development Agency offers an economic adjustment and public works grant. This particular program is directly tied to economic development activities with tangible outcomes that include the creation of business parks, multi-use developments, workforce training, and projects that lead to direct job creation and private capital investment in your communities. Projects in this opportunity usually are awarded about $1 million to $1.5 million with match requirements at around 50%. Eligible activities include improvements to public infrastructure, including water, sewer, roads, rail infrastructure, facility construction, and renovation. So all these EDA's eligibility criteria for this program is based on economic conditions of the applicant, so for the city of Amarillo. Particularly, they're looking at distress criteria being your per capita income and your unemployment rate. The specifics of the eligibility are that the applicant be less than 80% of the national average for per capita income, or you can qualify by having an unemployment rate that is 1% below the national average. So traditionally, the city of Amarillo would not be able to be eligible for this grant opportunity. However, with the COVID-19 pandemic, EDA's received significant funding through the CARES Act, and they've continued to prioritize similar type projects to help spur recovery from the pandemic. Additionally, one of the things that they've done is through the CARES funding designation, all jurisdictions have been deemed eligible to receive funding as long as the project's determined to assist the community to recover from economic conditions caused from the pandemic. So basically, this grant opportunity normally wouldn't be available to the city of Amarillo, but through the CARES funding, it actually has opened up because all jurisdictions are now eligible for this application. So as CARES funding, all these jurisdictions are opened up, CARES funding is moving very, very quickly, and we certainly anticipate funds through our EDA representative here locally. It says that funds may be exhausted as early as October or November. So specifically with CARES funding, it's a little bit more favorable. Match requirements under the CARES funding is at an 80-20 instead of a 50-50, which is pretty significant. And instead of the $1 million to $1.5 million awards, they're looking at total project costs in the $3 million range. So you're looking at a grant of about $2.4 million. So PRPC staff, we work with cities throughout the Texas Panhandle to assist them with application development. We always do application development at no charge to help communities bring these grant projects into their communities. Over the last few years, we worked with Amarillo College, City of Shamrock was awarded this year, City of Tulia, and the City of Canyon just within the last couple of years to develop and receive funding for EDA projects. So this particular project, the thing that's going to be most appealing to EDA are those shared spaces, are really the leasable space and having some tangible job creation numbers and commitment that we can point to and sell EDA that this is a job creation project. And with that, I can answer any questions on the specifics of the grant if you guys have any questions. But
okay, can I add one thing? We do already have 3 letters of support for this project in terms of people that are supportive of us pursuing this grant. So we'd be happy to share those with council, but I just wanted you to know that we do have 3 people that have already expressed support, and those letters would, in theory, go with the application to the EDA. So when we consider it next week, we'll be able to provide copies of those letters along with the resolution and kind of the white paper that would go to EDA to kind of summarize this project.
I think also, Council, if I could add one thing, the one question you have to ask when you're looking at something like this, it is a departure. You know, public-private partnership on public property is not the most common thing, especially not in the park environment. If you look at things statewide, but we have an opportunity with the way the parks are created to take an entrepreneurial approach to park management, park operations, park funding. As we've talked about during the budget process, we are and have historically been challenged with resources to be able to manage and operate our parks. This is a way that we could create economic vitality, create jobs, create excitement and activity in all of our parks, or at least in our bigger parks for sure. Thompson Park, John Stiff Park, and Rick Klein would be, as Michael said, primary initial opportunities. But it is an opportunity to take an entrepreneurial approach, and I think that's something that's unique among municipal operations statewide, especially when it comes to park operations. Most cities don't have or have not chosen and don't have the opportunity or legal ability to be able to explore projects like this, and we do. So it's something that will have a beneficial impact on our business community, and then we've had multiple businesses inquire about the opportunity to develop specifically in John Stiff Park, but there's also opportunities at the other large regional parks, as well as maybe possibly some smaller locations. So it's a way to generate revenue that can be allocated to park maintenance and park management that does not include increases in taxes, because there's revenue from leases and also from revenue sharing.
I'd also like to add that obviously we already have this type of arrangement working in one of our parks with Wonderland. That's city-owned property that is currently leased to a private entity, and so it would be falling in line with that type of model. It would just be taking it to John Stiff and those other areas that we've indicated. So it's not something that we would be leading the charge on. We've already got that type of model in place with Wonderland.
And we would definitely incorporate current and modern market rates and everything for everything we do.
So the next steps, obviously, staff would be recommending the submission of a grant application. That application would be for grant funds to carry out infrastructure improvements, as we talked about with water, sewer, road, lighting, things like that. And the city would be committing to contribute a certain amount towards the construction of those activities. It is important to note that there are in-kind match opportunities, and we will obviously look at that if the council decides to move forward with this resolution next week. But things like design on the project moving forward, in-kind things like land values. So there are some things that we could use and consider as in-kind matches. But what we'd like to do is next week bring a resolution forward for you to consider that would allow us to submit an application for this grant. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this point.
Michael, what's the dollar amount of the grant request?
We're still working with the city's engineer right now on what those final numbers are. As the PRCC, as Dustin suggested, we're looking at around $3 million plus or minus. And so again, at an 80-20 match, we're looking at about $600,000 for a $2.4 million return, somewhere in that ballpark. So it might be a little higher, it might be a little less, depending on what those engineering numbers come back as.
Okay, Michael.
So again, Mr. Cityman.
Go ahead, Elaine.
So that 600,000, where would that come from?
Have y'all worked through that, Michael? Because we would have to reallocate capital projects inside the general fund in order to make a match like that happen. That's not something that we've identified exactly right now, but we would have to, we do have the ability to do that. We frequently do that as we shuffle capital projects around to recognize new projects that might have a higher priority, and that's exactly what this would be.
And I think
I did hear you address that. Part of that, I'm just trying to get a grasp of some of the numbers, what we're looking at, trying to come up with. 600,000, part of that might be a value of in-kind. So I'm hearing you. I follow that you're not necessarily looking for all cash, but those will certainly be questions that we will have when you bring it before council for a vote.
Yes, ma'am. And as soon as we get those numbers from the city's engineer, we can share those with you. And again, as we move forward, we're going to look for every opportunity to use in-kind funding as opposed to just cash. So it may be a combination, and as we get those final numbers, then we can work through the details on where that funding comes from.
Eddie, did you have a question?
Yes, ma'am, I did. Michael, can you go back to the very first part of it? Right there. Next one.
This one?
Yes, sir. Okay, so I've got some pretty big concerns concerning traffic and all that's in there. I've seen how people drive and speed and do all this other kind of stuff. And now then we're going to open this up and we're going to let businesses come in and we're going to increase traffic even that much more. And I'm going to want to know that there's going to be things in place like maybe even where the star is, that they're going to plan that hawk type device there that it protects people that are crossing the street. I'm going to want to know that you've got some sort of road diet planned through there so that bicyclers and those that are pedestrians are going to feel safe in there, and it's going to be a little bit more difficult to have cars going through there, even to the point that maybe those intersections, have y'all considered maybe making those roundabouts so that the entrance and exit of that, people have got to be slow, have got to be careful. I think this looks like a great plan, but the only thing that bothers me is the way that the road is being set up. Are you all got a good, strong plan that it's going to protect the people that are in the park, protect the people that are in these orange spaces, so that we're not going to have, because I think you're going to have to deal with an increased amount of traffic that's coming in. I think it's going to work really well. I think it's a great idea. But at the same time, I think we've got to make for sure that we're setting this up in a way that's going to keep pedestrians, bicyclists, all the other people are going to have an equal access and feel equally safe in those spaces.
Well, and again, I think when it comes to the development concept, our primary focus is on park users. We want to make sure that that is the first and foremost concern. And so, yes, as we look at the design, I think there are concerns about it being a potential reliever for 45th, people cutting off and going over to Bell. So we've already had some conversations with the city engineer about what that could look like in terms of traffic solutions, because obviously you're right, there's going to be an increase in traffic, and we want to make sure that it's safe for the community, it's safe for people that are biking, walking, and just generally using the park, and that it doesn't become just a freeway. So we would look at all sorts of options in terms of how do we manage that traffic, how do we control that traffic where it doesn't just become a freeway. So absolutely, I share those concerns.
Any other questions or comments from council?
Michael, time frame. From what are we seeing, and Dustin, you may want to address that, from when an application is going in, how quickly are these being reviewed and granted?
Yes, ma'am, I can sure answer that for you. So we are working on a pretty quick time frame. As I said, our EDR, our EDA representative in this region has indicated that funds are being spent quickly, and they could be depleted as early as October or November. So we are working to get this in for consideration at the EDA IRC at the end of September. Generally, we actually did just submit an application for the city of Shamrock, who's being funded out of the CARES funding, and they still haven't been awarded. They've been notified of an award. You're given a couple months to, rectify, clean up a few things, whether that has to do with the environmental review that's part of the application process, or clarifying some of the in-kind contribution or the match dollars that are part of that process. And so they will hopefully, if everything goes as planned, we can get this in for consideration by the end of September. It will likely be a month to 6 weeks before we hear back on the outcome of that. And then once we do, after about the 6 weeks mark, if we're fortunate enough to be awarded, obviously there's no guarantees to be awarded. This is a nationwide competition, and so you're competing with applications from all over the place, so there's no guarantee there. But if we are fortunate enough, after we receive word, usually it's a 3 to 6 months before you actually have a funding contract in hand. I hope that answers your question for you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. City Manager, do you have what you need from us in order to be ready to bring that to council next week?
Yes, ma'am. We've got that.
Okay, great. I think we're ready to move to the next item then, and that is just an announcement of the application process for boards and commissions. Mr. City Manager.
Well, as we've talked about with Convention Visitors Bureau, we're going to be making some board appointments there. This is going to be outside the schedule of our normal winter appointment process that either happens in November or December. But we are coming up towards that November timeline, that October deadline for applying for boards and commissions, and the meetings where council works through all of our different boards and commissions to make sure that they're fully staffed. Or that citizens have been appointed to those boards and commissions. So to walk us through the process and what's going to be expected, we have Deputy City Manager Kevin Starbuck. Kevin?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. We are entering that time of year where we are accepting applications for the various boards and commissions that serve the community in an advisory capacity, working with City Council and with staff to bring policies and direction forward with the various departments and programs that they oversee. That process will open today. So we are looking at opening applications to the public today. If they have an interest in serving on a board and commission, with the city, and through that they can register online or fill out an application online, and then select what board or committee that they would like to serve on, and also provide us a resume or a different background of information that they may feel is appropriate for City Council to have available for them for consideration for those various boards and committees moving forward. As we look at it, we have positions available, whether it's a potential reappointment or a vacancy on just about every board and committee that the city has in the framework. And what we will do is collect those applications over the next month, finalize a roster of applicants for each board and committee, and work with the incumbents that may be eligible for reappointment, and present all of that information back to the City Council in late October for you to evaluate that information and then make appointments in the month of November, which will take place sometime in November during a council meeting, and then those terms would start on January 1st of next year as they come onto the committees. So that's really just a high-level overview, but wanted to make sure to bring to the City Council that we are starting that process, and people can go online to the city website and find the link for applying to serve on a board or a committee, finding a board or committee that they may have an interest in serving on, and make those applications to the city so that we can present that to the City Council for consideration.
Council, any questions or comments on that? Kevin, thank you very much.
And Mayor, are we planning any sort of social media push to inform our community when the application process opens and closes?
To answer that question, Councilman Hayes, yes. We will be working with Jordan and the team over in public communications to get that pushed out on the, obviously it's already available on the city website, but also to push that out via the social media mechanisms, press releases, etc., so that information is out there and available for people to go to the link on the city's website and make those applications. We will be looking at applications being open through the end of September. So looking at September 30th, kind of being that cutoff time for us to be able to sort through, collect them all, and then to place them with the various boards and committees that people have applied for, to then present to the City Council as staff finalizes that list with the current members. So members of boards or committees that want to potentially serve another term, we can verify that information and present a total package to the City Council. The other piece that I would relate to that is that people are not necessarily limited to putting their name forward to serve on multiple committees. So they can apply through the same application process. They don't have to fill it out each time for each board or committee. They can fill out one application and just indicate that they have an interest in multiple boards and committees if that's where their passion is, to serve on different boards and committees that may be available.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
I think what we've got up next is a monthly budget update, Mr. Seaman. Jared, you're on mute.
I said all kinds of great things while I was muted, and I, never come out the same. But to provide the monthly budget update, we've got Assistant City Manager Laura Storrs, our Chief Financial Officer. Laura?
Good afternoon. I'm going to share my screen on this presentation and walk you through the monthly budget update. So we are going to be discussing numbers for the month ending July 31st, but we do have some additional updates past July 31st on certain items. All right, so we will start with, if you'll bear with me a second, my screen is frozen. Let me try this another way. I apologize on that. Let's try this one more time. Okay. Bear with me. I apologize. I was trying to do it another way so we could see it a little bit better, and it does not appear to be working quite right. Okay, so we'll try it this way. If you guys will bear with me, I'll try to make this as large as possible so you can see the slides. So we're going to start talking about mainly the general fund portion of the City of Amarillo's budget. For the 10 months that end on July 31st, 2020, for revenue, on this slide, we're just looking at the revenue piece. The budgeted amount was $162.8 million. The actual revenues that we have collected, it comes in at $158 million. That produces a negative variance of $4.8 million. So as you can see, we've been talking about this for the past several months, knowing that COVID-19 was going to start impacting our revenue sources, and we are really starting to see some of those impacts happen. Now, again, I think that they're in much better shape than we originally anticipated, but we are starting to see that negative variance in the overall revenue collections. So we are down almost 3% in revenue for the first 10 months of the fiscal year. On this next slide, we're going to cover the expense. I'm sorry, this goes over the major revenue pieces that make up that $4.8 million. So the first item there is the property taxes, and you can see those are actually coming in $1.2 million over budget. And I know that seems like a very large number. A lot of that is related to timing. Some of it is related to the fact that when we are preparing the budget, we use a collection rate of 98.5%. And you can see that those collections are coming in much stronger than maybe we had originally anticipated, because at this point through the end of July, we're at 102% of the budget. So strong collection rates on those property taxes. Then sales tax, and we have a couple other slides in a minute that go over those, but we are down just under $1 million through July 31st on sales tax. Then on hotel occupancy taxes, through the end of July, we're down about $1.3 million versus our budget. On our gross receipts, our business taxes, those are franchise fees, we're about just a little over $1 million below budget. And we've got more information in a minute, but that is heavily driven by the electricity franchise fee. And then license and permits are coming in just slightly under budget for the first 10 months. Then charges for services are about $1.3 million below budget. And that is mainly related to parks and recreation. And again, as those revenues are coming in lower, please keep in mind that there have been a lot of reductions in costs related to parks and recreation that are offsetting these revenue reductions. For example, as you're all aware, we didn't open the city pools this summer. The outdoor pools, Warford is still open, but the other city pools were not open. So we're not seeing revenue come in from those sources, but we also are not incurring as many expenses related to the swimming pools this year either. Then the last item here is fines, and that is just related to those municipal court fees coming in lower than budget, and that's a trend that we're continuing to see, but also has been heavily impacted related to COVID-19. And please stop me if you have a question. Otherwise, I'm just going to go on to the next slide here. So let's look at expenses through July 31st for the general fund. So you can see that our budget is $156.6 million. Something to keep in mind, 70% of that budget is just related to personnel costs. We have spent $142.6 million in general fund for the first 10 months. That leaves a variance of $14 million. That's $14 million under budget in expenses for the first 10 months. And as the next slides are going to show us, is that is related to those those measures that were put in place very early on when COVID-19 was starting to impact the community, knowing that we were going to see those revenues starting to come down, there were a lot of measures put in place to ensure that expenses came down. And this slide shows that. You can see that we are trailing below our budget by $14 million, which produces a net variance of $9.2 million. So if you take that revenue variance, so we're coming in below on revenue, but we're coming in below on expenses by more than that, and that puts us at $9.2 million under budget overall. So bottom line, 9.2 to the good for the first 10 months. The next slide here, again, we've gone over this multiple times. This is the $12 million budget response that was put in place related to COVID. And you can see the largest amount there is related to those unfilled and frozen positions that went on a freeze in mid-March. And there's some large the departments that are being impacted by it. Actually, most of the general fund departments are being impacted, but you'll remember that there's 16 police officers. Actually, that number has grown some at this point, and there's 10 firefighters. And again, there's a reminder there, those cancellation of all the parks programs during the summer. There were several capital outlay and repair and maintenance projects that were delayed, and those are listed there for you as well. And again, on the reduced Civic Center capital funding of $1.2 million, kind of there at the middle of the page, that is offset by that anticipated loss in the hotel occupancy tax collections and the realized loss that we're seeing at this point related to overall budget. So now we're going to go specifically into sales tax. So what we have outlined, and I know we've been talking through July 31st at this point, but we do have our August sales tax collection numbers in. And so you'll see that, first of all, the month of August was a very good month for sales tax collections. And keep in mind that those collections are a 2-month lag, so they are for the sales that occurred during June. So if you'll remember, that's when we had restrictions on stay-at-home orders through the beginning of June, and then things started partially opening back up in June. And so we saw very positive sales tax collection numbers for the month of August that were for those June sales. We were up almost 7% over the August collections from the prior year, 2019. So down there at the bottom, you'll see that through July, we are tracking just a little bit over last year's collections, and through August, we are 1.4% over last year's collections. Over on the far bottom right, you'll see that we are still trailing behind our budget numbers for the current fiscal year, and that is because we built in an additional 2.5% increase over prior year collections because we were seeing such strong sales tax trends before COVID hit, and so that is why these numbers are still trailing behind budget through the month of August. The next slide here is just a graph that puts, there's a blue bar for the actuals from last fiscal year. The orange bar are the actuals from the current fiscal year, and the gray bar is the budget for the current fiscal year. So you can see that as we moved into the months that COVID impacted, we did see those actual collections for the current year slightly lower, but then they did increase back up in the month of August. This next slide is the same information we just went over, but wanted to show this line here for September. So what we have projected for the month of September, we took the average increase or decrease between the months of May, June, July, and August. Those were the months that were the sales impacted by COVID-19. We took the average increase or decrease between those 2 months from the prior year. That came out to an overall decrease of 2.3%, and we applied it to the September collections from 2019, and that is how we came up with the $4.9 million that we are anticipating possibly receiving this month for the last collections for the fiscal year. If we do come in about that level, we'll be below budget by just over 1% for the year. But you'll see that we're still trailing above prior year collections with that amount if we do hit that September amount. If there's not questions, I'm going to go on. Let's talk about hotel occupancy taxes.
Laura, I did have a question on that
Yes.
last slide.
Go ahead. Councilmember Hayes, can go ahead with your question.
If Laura, could you walk back through what each of those columns represent? I don't see a heading at the top, so mine may be just cut off, but to walk back through, that first column is
first column are last fiscal year's collections. So as you go at the top of the column, that would be October of 2018 all the way through September of 2019. And then the second,
okay. Laura,
second column
that's perfect. I'm just scrolling down. Now I can see the headings. I wasn't following you because I couldn't see those headings. If you could scroll it down just slightly bit, I think I'll get all my references.
And I do apologize because I'm having some issues on my end from a scrolling standpoint. So I don't know that I can scroll it down any for you. I apologize. And I can certainly send you a copy of this presentation after the meeting.
That'd be a great idea, Laura. I know I can see it all on my screen, so I don't know what the difference is there, but sending a copy afterwards would be really helpful, I think.
Okay, great. And if you guys will bear with me for just a second, I think Stephanie said she's going to try to share her screen. And I will walk her through. So I apologize. It's amazing how these things work in test mode. And then when you go to the live presentation, they don't always work. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. And Stephanie, if you'll start us on slide 10 and see if it works a little better on your end. Right there. Oh, go back one. Perfect. Councilmember Hayes, can you see that a little bit better?
Yes, now I see all of the column headings. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, all right. Thank you all for your patience with us on this. Okay, so now we'll go on to the next slide where we start discussing hotel occupancy taxes. And Stephanie, if you'll go one more, we can look at the collections are detailed out from last fiscal year is the first column, current fiscal year is the second column, and then that increase or decrease. And then the second to last column is the budget for the current year, and then the last column is the variance between what we've actually collected this year and the budget. So we have seen very strong numbers, especially related to the impact that COVID-19 has had on our hoteliers. We know that they have taken a very significant hit related to COVID-19. However, we are seeing strong collection numbers. Based on what we were originally projecting, the numbers are coming in much stronger at this point. So for August, if you'll go kind of to the middle of your page there, for August, those are the most recent collections that we have received. Those would be for the stays that occurred during July. Those August numbers are they're about a 25% decrease from the prior year. When we were originally estimating the impact of COVID-19, we were anticipating it could be somewhere around 50% decrease from the prior year. So those numbers, we have been very pleased with the trend on that. We know it's going to take some time for the hoteliers to see full recovery, but those numbers certainly are trending in the right direction. So if you'll look down kind of in the middle, we have numbers through August. We're seeing an overall 25% decrease from the prior year, and that's right in line with the budget as well, about a 25% decrease from what we had budgeted. Down there at the bottom, if you'll note, these are the gross collections, and then we also have the hot rebate that is paid back to the Downtown Convention Hotel, and those numbers are detailed out there as well, and so that our net collection numbers are listed there, and those are trending the same way, about 25% below prior year and about 24% below budget through the end of August. Stephanie, if you'll go to the next slide. Okay, this one here, it graphs, the blue bar are the actuals from last fiscal year. The orange bar is current year actuals, and the gray bar is current year budget. Then we also have the 28, so last fiscal year occupancy rates on the yellow line, and we have the current year occupancy rates on the blue line. So you'll see that in April, we started seeing that large dip related to the occupancy rates and have seen those continue to climb through July. And so that is certainly trending very positive, and it's getting close to the occupancy rates that we were seeing last year at the same time. So this is certainly an encouraging slide. Stephanie, if you'll go to the next one for me, please. Okay, and on this slide, all this has, in addition to what we covered on 2 slides ago, is we have a September number listed in here. And we kept this with what our original projection was, and that's at 50%, a 50% decrease in September from the prior year. Now, at this point, we're thinking that number is going to come in much stronger. But if it comes in at least 50% of the prior year, what we're looking at is about a 28% decrease from our overall budget. And our budget included a 3% increase over the prior year. So all things considered, the numbers are coming in stronger than anticipated. But again, we feel like that $2 million negative variance from our budget will actually be smaller than that with the trend we've seen over the last couple of months. So that September number is still very conservative at this point, and any increase over that will help reduce that $2 million in the bottom right-hand corner, that $2 million negative variance from our budget. Any questions on hotel occupancy taxes? Okay, if not, on this slide, this has been revised for the updated collections. And what we're showing here is the original budget and the uses of those hot collections in the various categories based on the original budget and now the revised budget association that occurred related to COVID-19. So the first column of numbers is the original budget, and the second column is the revised budget. So you can see that's about a $2 million decrease there in the overall receipts. But you can see that our debt service funding is still stable. You can see that the Civic Center capital has been eliminated. There's been a slight increased need related to Civic Center operations. And then you can see the CVC operations, that $2 million original budget has come down to about 1.2 for the current fiscal year. And we've been working very closely with Cashin to ensure that they come in as close as possible to this revised budget, but this number has actually increased a little over the past couple of months, and we anticipate it increasing after we get those final collection numbers in for the month of September. And so that will certainly help CVC going forward, having that budget come in as close as possible, that final budget come in as close as possible to what they're going to spend in the current year. Down at the bottom, oh, sorry, Stephanie, if you'll go back, thank you. Down at the bottom, just as a reminder, we've got detailed out the 1920 annual debt service payments for the MPEV and the parking garage and those funding sources associated with it, showing that we do have sufficient funding available to make all debt service payments on the MPEV and the parking garage, and there will be some funds at the end of the fiscal year available to use for debt service payments next year if there is a need for that. If there's not any questions, then Stephanie, I'll let you take us to the next slide. And then if you'll go one more, so we're going to talk about gross receipts, business taxes. These are the franchise fees. And this is a trend we've been seeing all fiscal year. So you'll see on the far right-hand side, through the month of July, we are coming in below budget by about 7% overall, which translates to a little over $1.1 million. And the vast majority of that is in that top line item there on the electricity franchise fee. no surprise at all. We have been talking about this again for months, and it's related to that low fuel factor that is keeping those electricity rates lower. And so, yes, we are seeing revenues come in lower on the expense side. It's not necessarily a one-for-one correlation, but on the city's expense side, we are seeing lower electricity bills as well. But we are seeing the vast majority of the variance below budget in franchise fees related to that electricity franchise fee. Stephanie, if you'll go to the next slide. And it's just a graph that shows the different types of franchise fees. And I recognize this is a little bit small here, but it shows pretty well that the gray bar are the actuals and the orange bar is the budget. And so you can see that electricity, most of them are very close to budget except for electricity. And then Stephanie, if you'll go to the next one, or go over 2, please. Let's now talk about utility sales. So on our utility revenues, you'll see there at the top that solid waste and landfill fees are coming in strong for the year. Solid waste collections are coming in right in line with budget, actually with a 0% variance. So very, very close to budget. And landfill, those fees are remaining very strong. They're actually over budget by $632,000, which is a 27% increase over budget. So those numbers are very strong through the end of July. Then in the middle section there, water sales are remaining below budget at this point by 2%. It's about a little over $1 million less than what we had anticipated on budget. And that is a number, it's been hovering right at about that amount for the past several months. We do know that there was some impact from the commercial side related to COVID and businesses being shut down or scaled back. We have made up some of that variance over the past couple of months, but we haven't made it all up. But again, this is through July, and then August and September sales are still to be shown. And those are 2 of the largest months for revenue for water sales. And then sewer sales are coming in right in line with budget, just slightly below by $59,000. And then the last line there are those drainage revenue fees, and those are coming in strong this year, over budget by about 9% or $433,000. And that is the drainage group working very diligently to ensure we're billing everything properly on that drainage utility. If there's not any questions, go over to Stephanie. And this is the last piece of information related to health insurance expense for the city. You'll see that those far right 2 columns, the great news through the end of July, we were below budget on health insurance medical claims by about $1.5 million. That's an 8% positive variance. And again, I know I sound like a broken record, but we do feel like COVID-19 had an impact on our medical claims experience this year. As we had more stay-at-home orders, we had a period of time where only emergency procedures were being conducted. There were more people that were not doing any type of elective procedure or any kind of an annual exam or procedure. And so that did drive down our medical claims numbers for the past few months. And so as we're starting to see the claims numbers trend up, which is normal, those lower months of claims experience are certainly helping to offset it. So you can see that we're still to the good by about $1.5 million. And with that, are there any questions from council on anything that we have covered today?
So Laura, that $9.2 million in excess of revenues over expenses, where does that end up? How do municipalities deal with that size of an excess? Is that just our carryover balance going forward? How does that impact next year's budget?
So on some of those savings, we will look at some of the delayed capital items that were not conducted in the current fiscal year. We will look at the need to go ahead and move forward with some of those. We do also have some items like compensated absences that are behind on funding for the current year, and that funding might be available to help fund that piece as well. Otherwise, it will roll into the overall reserves for the general fund to be reallocated in the future based on priorities of council and city management. And so normally any savings do wind up going towards normally like a capital project of some sort, because those are one-time dollars. They are not recurring savings. They are one-time savings. And so those are not things that can be built into any kind of a reoccurring cost going forward. Does that help answer your question?
Yes. Where would those show up? So, just again, repeating what you said, that a lot of those savings came because we froze hiring. And we still need to hire those individuals. And a lot of that is going to be in next year's budget. Another thing is we stopped some projects and repairs, maintenance that needed to happen in the city, but we froze it, but those need to happen. And so are those capital projects, as you referred to, already reflected of getting those back into next year's budget?
We did not take any of this anticipated savings and roll it forward into next year's budget. It is something that would be analyzed after the final year-end numbers come in. The problem with putting it into budget for next year, if you'll remember, we start our budget process back in about April. And in April was when we were in the beginning stages of dealing with this pandemic and trying to understand the impacts of it. So as we formulated the budget for next fiscal year, we tried to keep it conservative based on revenues that we would be recognizing next fiscal year and not any savings from the current fiscal year, because we didn't know if we'd have any savings at all. We were just holding those costs, like related to the hiring freeze and those delayed capital projects and repairs and maintenance type items. We were holding those, not knowing how revenues were going to come in. Now we are about a month out from our fiscal year end. And so we know a lot more at this point than we did back in about April and May when we were heavily forming that budget for next fiscal year. So those will be items that, that Mr. Miller will be kind of looking at if there's some projects, capital projects that need to move forward. He would look at if there's money to go towards that. Otherwise, those dollars, again, would roll into reserves to be reallocated into the next budget process. And by the next one, I'm saying fiscal year 21-22. The other thing is if those do roll into reserves, and I hope that this is not something we're going to even have to discuss, but as we move into next fiscal year, if we have another large economic impact associated with COVID-19 and we start seeing revenues drop, we would have different discussions internally about, do we pull from these excess reserves from this year, or do we put measures in place again like what we did this year? Hiring freezes, delaying capital projects. And Jared may want to kind of expand upon that as well.
Yeah, we're just maintaining a very conservative posture, Councilman Hayes. We are economically, and specifically with regard to sales taxes, we're trending better with regard to where we were previous to COVID than I would say most cities. Can't say all, because a couple of cities in the state of Texas are just going gangbusters with 30 and 40% sales tax increases versus previous days. And that usually denotes that they have significant shopping opportunities in their town. That said, given the uncertainty of what's going to be happening in specific, I think really the next 6 to 10 months, it's just really difficult to say with any certainty. So we're maintaining a conservative posture. If we continue this trend with recovering sales taxes and then moving up to the numbers that we were budgeting for last year, or for this current year, then we will have the capacity to move towards some of the capital projects that were deferred. We're moving back into doing capital projects this year that we weren't doing this current year, or doing capital projects next year that we weren't doing that we deferred this year, but we're not at a point where we can replace all of the project money that we did not do. We're doing them for next year, but there's a gap of a year where we just really didn't do much because of coronavirus over the last 6-8 months because of coronavirus. So we'll reinstate some of that as possible and as the economy recovers, but we want to take a very conservative posture going into next year just because of the unknown.
So it sounds like the temporary holding spot is in reserves. So when you are closing out your year end, you're going to move, you're keeping those dollars in reserve. We're not spending them on previously approved CIP programs or anything like that. As the next year goes through, is that a withdrawal from reserves? Is that something that is approved, is brought before council, or is that a staff authorization?
We would no, it would not be a staff authorization. We would, because it would be an expenditure above and beyond, potentially above and beyond what was approved by council, we would come to council for approval for those projects. There's a lot of routine capital projects that we have deferred, whether it's facility projects or street projects, general and very low-level resurfacing, pothole repair, just some general stuff that needs to be done. There's also some larger capital projects that have been deferred as well. So there will be a lot of value-based decisions to be made as we go through this process.
And thank you. That helps clarify a lot. It's a good position to be in. To end up at the end of the year, have that excess reserves and think, okay, maybe next year we will be able to actually speed up some of that 5-year CIP project timeline. But that helps me understand how that decision will be made.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That do it for our monthly budget update? Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
Okay, let's move to the sales tax update, please.
Then we have a very brief sales tax update from Andrew, as Laura intimated, and kind of not through any nefarious intent, just gave away Andrew's thunder on August. Sure. Andrew, walk us through it.
Sure did. So I'll go through this quickly. Did want to touch on some of the similar indicators that we've touched on in previous meetings. Laura touched on the occupancy numbers. This is a little smaller graph that shows the last 3 years of fiscal year. Of course, you can see the increase we're seeing over the last few months, up 36% since April, moving into July, but still trailing the 65 to 75% range that we usually see in the summer months, just for comparison. As far as the average daily rates, for July, we were at $71.86 compared to typically being in the low 80s, but we have seen that increase over the last few months since that significant drop in April. So they are starting to perform a little bit better. And once we get into the weekly numbers here, you can see there has been, at least in the recent weeks, a small dip, but speaking to some of the hoteliers, that's fairly typical when it comes to back to school season and less hotel stays as far as vacations and shifting more to business travel than vacation. So I've still been struggling a little bit with the previous Buxton GPS data software and accessing that, so I wanted to show you a little bit of a different comparison with Google and Apple mobility data. This is Potter County. On the left-hand side is April figures, and on the right-hand side is August. You can see early on in April, that's where you saw retail and recreation take a big dip to negative 48%. Parks went down, grocery stores went down, basically across the board. We saw major decreases in foot traffic. But on the right-hand side, now that we're in August, you've seen retail increase 7%. Grocery is about even where it would typically be. Parks have increased 51%. What is interesting is you're still seeing a decline in workplace. So I think that shows that people are still staying working from home where possible. But just to give you an idea of where mobile traffic is taking place. This is a similar slide for Randall County, showing 37% down retail back in April and now plus 10% in August. Grocery store up 2% compared to down 19%. And also seeing not as much as a decrease in workplace traffic, but still down 27% compared to 36%. As far as Apple, this is all in one graph for Randall and Potter County, but back in April, Randall was down 48% and Potter down 49%, and now they're both back up to the 96%, 100% range compared to the baseline back in January. So definitely seeing mobility trends increasing. As far as sales tax, I just want to touch on the last few months of the overall industry data. Of course, May we were down 6%. We basically saw every category except for miscellaneous was at a decrease. Even retail at negative 3.54, but we see in the coming slides that retail has really increased quite a bit once shopping has continued. In June, we also saw all but one down. In that case, it was wholesale that was up just over 0%. So really, that was the biggest month where everybody saw pretty significant declines. July is when retail really took off with a 15.79% increase compared to the previous year. Miscellaneous was also up 12%. And then August, which has ended up being the biggest August we've had, and all the data that I was able to review took off significantly. Retail is up 12.91%, and another good indicator of performance is our food category, up 3% compared to the previous few months, where it's just been down across the board as far as food traffic to our restaurants and limited service restaurants. So here's a detailed snapshot of August, which is our most recent data that we have access to for June 2020 sales. You can see retail again up 12.91%, and really compared to last year, this almost seems like a typical year for us when you're comparing the numbers to the previous year as far as performance. We had a few down in 2019. We have a few down compared to 2020. And instead of the typical charts that showed you really every single industry data, I wanted to just pull a few, just kind of give you a snapshot of how you're performing. This is that overall retail category where you can see, except for the decreases in May and June, we've really seen increases going all the way back. You have to go back to July 2019 where retail was underperforming. So it's performed very well now, back on track and better than all the previous data that we have. Retail non-store, this is your online sales that we talk about each month, where it's just 100%, 200% increases. It just continues to grow as more online sales take place with Amazon, other retailers that don't have a brick and mortar store. So the highest number we've had in history so far, July 2020, that was a 214% increase, that second bar from the right. Retail general merchandise, this is another one of the major revenue categories as far as sales tax go, and you can see they as well have increased the last couple of months compared to a 4-month in a row decline between March and June. So they're performing much better at a 10% in July and a 4.1% in August. As far as building materials, this is one of those categories that performed well throughout has performed well throughout the COVID pandemic taking place. More people staying at home, having more stay-at-home projects, do-it-yourself projects. So since January, we've just seen constant growth and increase, with the most recent being 28% and 34% compared to previous year. Food and beverage category, this includes convenience stores, grocery stores. What we've seen this August is it's basically flat, just 0.01% compared to the last few months where we've seen increases of 11%, almost 8%, and almost 8.5%. So I think the food and beverage industry is kind of starting to level out a bit as far as their performance from the previous spikes due to COVID. Clothing and accessories is another good category just to see if people are out and about shopping at our local boutiques and clothing, jewelry stores, those kinds of businesses. August is the first one in 4 months, so we see an increase of 3% compared to declines in the 10% to 24% range the last few months. And then I wanted to touch on food category just a little bit. You can see they had 4 months of straight declines when people just weren't going out and eating, going to the restaurants. August is the first one where we've seen a 3% increase. And then I wanted to move into the two categories that we track: full service, which is your more typical sit-down restaurants. It's getting very close to breaking even or going back to positive. The latest month in August is negative 1.54% compared to anywhere from 15% to almost 40% in declines they saw the previous months. And then the limited, more fast food, fast casual type restaurants, those have actually seen an increase the last 2 months, with August being 8.32% and July at 1.7%. And then their declines were in the 8 to 10% range before they started making a turnaround. But you can see going back to September, they were constantly seeing increases year over year, except for these 2 months. So they're always one of our higher performance categories. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch on the workforce data. The most recent data came out for July in late August. So you can see compared to 2019 at 2.9%, we're now seeing us at 5.3%. So going back to April, every month we've seen it come down a little bit as far as our city limits performance. And then this last slide is our MSA. You can see the comparison on how the MSA is performing compared to Texas and the U.S. July was 5.1 for the MSA, Texas at 8.2%, and the U.S. at 10.5. So Amarillo and the MSA continue to perform better than most areas. I believe we continue to have the lowest unemployment rate in the state as a city, and I think MSA as well. And then you can see on the right-hand side how some of the performance has changed as far as the different industries. We're still not seeing a monthly change in leisure and hospitality, so it's at 0%, still down negative 34%. Financial increase 7.4% for the month, still down negative 14%. So you can see which categories still have room for improvement as we see more jobs come back online. And with that, do y'all have any questions?
Andrew, do we have any method of tracking? Do we know how many businesses have closed since the start of COVID-19?
I do not have tracking for that, more than just the ones you might see on Facebook or social media as far as tracking. Since we don't have business permits per se, we don't have a database of who's got an active permit or not. But I could research that and see if I can find any particular info from you. I can at least check our sales tax to see if anybody stopped paying. That could be an indicator that they're no longer in business. But I can research that for you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, council? Andrew, thank you very much for the data that you pull together, make those presentations for us.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, council, just final thing on our agenda is just any future requests for reports or any items you want to put on the agenda.
Mary, you're muted.
Sorry, I was pushing the wrong button. I had my finger on the shift button. So I would turn it over to the city attorney just to read our special executive session language, please.
So at the Texas Open Meetings Act closed session, the Amarillo City Council was announced on September the 1st, 2020 at 3:48 p.m. under the following authority. Section 551.072 discussed the purchase, exchange, sale, lease, or value of real property. A public discussion of such would not be in the best interest of the city's bargaining position. Section 551.087 discussed commercial or financial information received from an existing business or business prospect, which the city is negotiating for the location or retention of a facility, or for incentives the city is willing to extend, or financial information submitted by the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, That's going to dismiss us to executive session. Do you